theories video. We love them here on the channel. I love doing them, you love watching them, and the support on them is always great. So we're back with another installment relatively soon after the last one we did. But today, as you can tell by the title, we've got some conspiracy theories about rap and rappers. I've basically got 3 conspiracy theories which we're going to break down, 2 of which are about individual rappers, and then 1 is a conspiracy theory about the rap industry as a whole. So yeah, looking forward to this one a lot, and I reckon we stop with the introductions and get straight into them. So we're gonna start off with a big one, and that is, of course, is Tupac still alive? Well, this article is titled "Why the Tupac Lives Conspiracy Refuses to Die." Is Tupac alive? Despite the fact that Tupac Shakur has now been dead for nearly as long as he lived, 25 years, his name appears in headlines more often than many artists who are still breathing. In the last year or so alone, Tupac has been resurrected via deepfake technology to appear in a Snoop Dogg video and fronted the new season of Supreme as a hologram. This is a continuation of an aggressive posthumous life cycle for the late rap legend, with Tupac releasing 7 of his 11 platinum albums in death, headlining Coachella back in 2012, and giving Kendrick Lamar a pep talk on arguably the most important album of the 2010s. One of the main reasons the late rapper still feels so omnipresent is the enduring conspiracy theory that he didn't succumb to gunshot wounds sustained in a drive-by by shooting on the Las Vegas Strip on September 13th, 1996, but escaped to Cuba and has been laughing at us ever since. Just a quick search of Tupac in Google News and you'll find monthly tabloid stories dedicated to the subject, with new sightings of the rapper and fresh reports on the method in which he faked his death. One of the latest theories suggests Tupac switched with a double and was flown out of Las Vegas by a helicopter after learning someone was planning to assassinate him. Filmmaker Rick Boss, the director of the documentary Tupac: The Great Escape from UMC, claims Tupac is hiding out in New Mexico. Let's just say, Mr. Shakur, the family is aware of the movie and they're okay with the title, so that should tell you more or less what's going on, Boss told Las Vegas TV station KDNV. There is no end to such stories, but it fails to explain why this particular conspiracy has endured. It does, however, tell us a few things about the way it continues to spread. So, this section is titled "A Campaign of Playful Campaign Misinformation." So, Tupac's body was still warm when his posthumous album Machiavelli was being marketed in November 1996, with billboards that read "Listen very carefully" and a music video for the lead single Hail Mary, which featured Tupac quite literally rising up from the earth to murder all of his enemies. I know ad-libs and stuff were added to this 7-Day Theory album after Pac's death to keep him feeling alive, revealed Ronald Brent, who was responsible for the record's haunting artwork, in a 2019 interview with Crack magazine. Although some may find it incredibly tacky, Death Row CEO Suge Knight knew that creating the illusion of his prized asset, faking his own death, would generate an intrigue that could sustain record sales long after the rapper's passing. The next section is titled "Proof That Tupac is Still Alive." In 2017, Knight, who is currently in prison, was still peddling this theory, suggesting to Ice-T in a TV interview has even claimed back is living in Malaysia and working on a new album. This marketing plan was even furthered by the Tupac Shakur estate itself, which was managed by his mother, Afeni Shakur. The 1997 music video for I Wonder If Heaven Got a Ghetto, sounded well posh saying that, features an off-camera Tupac arriving by helicopter in the desert just a day after his murder, furthering a conspiracy theory that the aforementioned Mr. Boss would later take to heart. Meanwhile, Tupac's 2003 double album Better Days features an outro where Tupac repeats the words, Expect me like you expect Jesus to come back. I'm coming, over and over. On 2004's woeful Loyal to the Game, which Afeni problematically signed off, the project's awkward producer, Eminem, shamelessly manipulated Tupac's ad-libs so that he shouted G-Unit in the mother-ing house, and had conversation with guests like Obi Trice and Jadakiss. Tupac was also prone to rapping lyrics that reference plots to overthrow his enemies or surviving being shot. On I Ain't Hard to Find, he raps, I heard rumours I died, murdered in cold blood, dramatised, pictures of me in my final state, you know mama cried, but that was fiction, some coward got the story twisted. Well, absolute bars I'm spitting here. Lyrics like these have only aided the conspiracy theories, with fans interpreting some of these lyrics to reference his 1996 murder, rather than the 5 shots he survived after getting robbed outside New York's Quad Studios back in 1994. His music surely is fertile ground for being misunderstood by conspiracy theorists, and the people who own Pac's music must have been well aware of the power behind this confusion. There is a prevailing sense that a label executive knew pushing the Tupac conspiracy could be a very lucrative business decision. They are gleefully rubbing their hands together right now, watching the monster they've created continue to mutate. This next section is titled with a question. Is Tupac still alive in Cuba? I used to believe in the Tupac conspiracy theory myself. I distinctly remember staying up all night on September 13th, 2003, convinced I was about to read a Who story about the return of Tupac Shakur. Like the thousands of other teenagers on the Tupac Lives forum that I spent my summer holidays studying, the idea that Tupac faked his death and would return 7 years later was an all-consuming obsession. The evidence felt overwhelming. Tupac named his last album Machiavelli, the 7-Day Theory, an interesting source of inspiration as its author, Niccolo Machiavelli, wrote in his masterpiece The Prince about faking death to fool your enemies. Weirder still, Suge Knight wasn't listed as the record's executive producer, but Simon was. Yeah, the first apostle to see Jesus rise from the grave. Tupac took 7 days to die, and if you listen to Hail Mary loudly enough, you can hear someone whisper, "You think I'm dead," around the 3-second mark, followed by Tupac's slightly louder reply of, "Wait 7 years." Tupac's political revolutionary aunt, Assata Shakur, has been hiding from the FBI in Cuba since 1979, a perfect location for her nephew to hide out in. Also, I told myself. Someone even persuaded me that Tupac's autopsy picture was faked by cutting his sleeping body from the California Love music video and pasting it onto a mortuary table via Photoshop. And the article concludes with, "Let Tupac's legacy live on, and not some conspiracy." In life, Tupac was a walking contradiction, capable of both empowering women and calling them thirsty hose in the same verse. Even though his targets weren't always the right ones, the fact Tupac thunderously delivered his thuggish sermons from the very back of his throat was so compelling that it made you directly invest in his perspective, no matter how clumsy it might have been. He famously pledged to use a magnum to kill his enemies' children. Nice. Whether he was rapping about the struggle of single black mothers cooking up miracles in the kitchen, or the idea of smoking weed to stave off suicidal thoughts, Tupac made your hair stand up and your chest sticks out more boldly. One of Tupac's most famous quotes had him boldly stating, "My only fear of death is reincarnation," and now these are words which we should finally start to heed. Remember Tupac for the life that he lived, not the afterlife that the music industry created. Yeah, while it's, all of that stuff is certainly interesting, using music as evidence is just really not, it's not really sound, is it? Because it's clear that these greedy music producers could have just ad-libbed in loads of stuff to basically raise intrigue and interest in the album and make a lot of money, and obviously it has worked. So now on to the second conspiracy theory, staying along the lines of whether a rapper is still alive. We're now going to look at whether is XXXtentacion still alive. Following the death of XXX, who passed away in a shooting in Miami earlier in June 18, there have been many conspiracy theories and false rumours circulating online. The rapper, real name Jace Dwayne Onfroy, has been confirmed dead by the local Browood Sheriff Office. His manager also released a statement confirming his death, stating that the artist tragically passed away from a gunshot wound. An arrest has since been made and the suspect charged. Police are looking for an accomplice. Here are some of the conspiracy theories and false rumours, ranging from that he could still be alive to the suggestion that he may have predicted his own passing. Firstly, his latest music video shows him at his own funeral. A posthumous music video for the song Sad, which was shot before, has been released. It shows the rapper visiting his own funeral. I'll put it on screen for you. Next, some fans think he faked his own death. There has been speculation by some fans on social media that the rapper is still alive and faked his own death, despite official confirmation of his passing from authorities. One Twitter thread that has been widely shared points to a previous publicity stunt that saw XXX appear to fake his own suicide before revealing that it was for a subsequent music video. The Twitter user Passinvain suggests that the star either faked his own death due to the amount of conspiracy in his life along with the overwhelming fame, or to promote a new single possibly called No Pulse. There's no evidence that XXX actually had a single coming by that name. The tweeter goes on to note how a video from the crime scene showed no blood, no shattered glass, no bullet holes, and also argued that the rapper's forehead tattoo is missing in the clip, suggesting that the individual depicted could be a double. How has an old video caused confusion? Well, last August, XXX shared a clip that appeared to show him taking his own life. It was later revealed that the incident was a publicity stunt ahead of the rapper's Look at Me music video, released in September 2017. Following XXX's death, an old video has been circulated of the rapper saying that he was still alive and that his apparent death was part of a music video. While a number of fans believed it to be current, the clip actually dated back to August 2017 and refers to the Look at Me publicity stunt. Next question. Did XXX predict his own death? In an undated Instagram live video, he raised the possibility of his death. If worst thing comes to worst and I die or I'm not reading the swear words, and I'm not able to see out my dreams, I at least want to know that the kids perceived my message and were able to make something of themselves and able to take my message and use it and turn it into something positive and to at least have a good life, he said in the clip. The rapper continued, if I'm going to die or ever be a sacrifice, I want to make sure that my life made at least 5 million kids happy, or they found some sort of answers or resolve in my life regardless of the negative around my name, regardless of the bad things people say about me. Fans have claimed the clip was his last Instagram live video before his death, but it's not currently known exactly when the video is from. X's lawyer has claimed that he urged the star to increase his personal security before he was killed. Attorney David Bogenschutz recalled how he advised on Freud to step up his security. We talked about him needing more, that he must pass the point of being a kid making melodies on a street corner, Bogenschutz said. It has been reported that the rapper had no security team at the time of his death. And then, to finish, it asks, what are the Drake rumours? There has been speculation by fans that lyrics from Drake's latest single, I'm Upset, could have foreshadowed X's death. SMS XXX, that's the only time I ever shoot below the neck. While you keep on shooting if you know that. Dead. Drake raps on the track. X previously had beefed with Drake after suggestions that he ripped off the flow of Look at Me with the more live track KMT. Drake hasn't addressed the claims, but it appears that the rapper is actually referring to sending explicit and intimate photos to a romantic interest with the lyrics in question. And it finishes by saying, police have arrested 22-year-old Dedrick D. Williams, who was taken into custody on June 20 and charged with first-degree murder. Yeah, similar to the Tupac one, there's definitely some interesting things there, but I think, especially with this XXX one, it's just a lot of fans not being able to accept that he was dead, and they were looking for any potential clues and stuff that he might still be alive. So this next one is, as I mentioned in the intro, isn't about a specific rapper, but it's about the rap industry as a whole, and in my opinion, I think it's probably the most interesting one, probably the most juicy. So yeah, let's get into this. So the title: record labels own stock in prisons, so sell music that will send people to prison. Okay, so we're gonna read an unsigned secret meeting letter. It was originally posted on the blog Hip Hop is Red and was written by a self-proclaimed decision maker working for an equally anonymous major record label. The letter claims that music companies invested in private prisons and conspire to glorify criminal activity through rap music to help fill these prisons. The anonymous nature of the letter led many to dismiss it as a bogus piece of conspiracy theory. However, before you jump to the same conclusion, consider the fact that judges have been convicted and gone to jail for exactly the same thing that this letter claims happened. So, here's what the letter says. Hello. After more than 20 years, I finally decided to tell the world what I witnessed in 1991, which I believe was one of the biggest turning points in popular music and ultimately American society. I've struggled for a long time weighing the pros and cons of making this story public, as I was reluctant to implicate the individuals who were present that day. So I've simply decided to leave out names and all the details that may risk my personal well-being, and that of those who were, like me, dragged into something they weren't ready for. Between the late 80s and early 90s, I was what you may call a decision maker with one of the more established companies in the music industry. I came from Europe in my early 80s and quickly established myself in the business. The industry was different back then. Since technology and media weren't accessible to people like they are today, the industry had more control over the public and had the means to influence them any way it wanted. This may explain why in early 1991 I was invited to attend a closed-door meeting with a small group of music business insiders to discuss rap music's new direction. Little did I know that we would be asked to participate in one of the most unethical and destructive business practices I have ever seen. The meeting was held at a private residence on the outskirts of Los Angeles. I remember about 25 to 30 people being there, most of them familiar faces. Speaking to those I knew, we joked about the theme of the meeting, as many of us did not care for rap music and failed to see the purpose of being invited to a private gathering to discuss its future. Among the attendees was a small group of unfamiliar faces, who stayed to themselves and made no attempt to socialise beyond their circle. Based on their behaviour and formal appearances, they didn't seem to be in our industry. Our casual chatter was interrupted when we were asked to sign a confidentiality agreement, preventing us from publicly discussing the information presented during this meeting. Needless to say, this intrigued and in some cases disturbed many of us. The agreement was only a page long, but very clear on the matter and consequences, which stated that violating the terms would result in job termination. We asked several people what this meeting was about and the reason for such secrecy, but couldn't find anyone who had answers for us. A few people refused to sign and walked out. No one stopped them. I was tempted to follow, but curiosity got the best of me. A man who was part of the unfamiliar group collected the agreements from us. Quickly after the meeting began, one of my industry colleagues thanked us for attending. He then gave the floor to a man who only introduced himself by first name and gave no further details about his personal background. I think it was the owner of the residence, but it was never confirmed. He briefly praised all of us for the success we had achieved in our industry and congratulated us for being selected as part of this small group of decision makers. At this point, I began to feel slightly uncomfortable at the strangeness of this gathering. The subject quickly changed as the speaker went on to tell us that the respective companies we represented had invested in a very profitable industry which could become even more rewarding with our active involvement. He explained that the companies we work for had invested millions into the building of privately owned prisons, and that our positions of influence in the music industry would actually impact the profitability of these investments. I remember many of us in the group immediately looking at each other in confusion. At the time, I didn't know what a private prison was, but I wasn't the only one. Sure enough, someone asked what these prisons were and what any of this had to do with us. We were told that these prisons were built by privately owned companies who received funding from the government based on the number of inmates. The more inmates, the more money the government would pay these prisons. It was also made clear to us that since these prisons are privately owned, as they become publicly traded, we'd be able to buy shares. Most of us were taken back by this. Again, a couple of people asked what this had to do with us. At this point, my industry colleague who had first opened the meeting took the floor again and answered our questions. He told us that since our employers had become silent investors in this prison business, it was now in their interest to make sure that these prisons remained filled. Our job would be to help make this happen by marketing music which promotes criminal behaviour, rap being the music of choice. He assured us that this would be a great situation for us, because rap music was becoming an increasingly profitable market for our companies, and as employees, we'd also be able to buy personal stocks in these prisons. Immediately silence came over the room. You could have heard a pin drop. I remember looking around to make sure I wasn't dreaming and saw half the people with drop jaws themselves. My daze was interrupted when someone shouted, "Is this a effing joke?" At this point things became chaotic. Two of the men who were part of the unfamiliar group grabbed the man who shouted out and attempted to remove him from the house. A few of us, myself included, tried to intervene. One of them pulled out a gun and we all backed off. They separated us from the crowd and all four of us were escorted outside. My industry colleague who had opened up the meeting earlier hurried out to meet us and reminded us that we had signed the agreement and would suffer the consequences of speaking about this publicly, or even with those who attended the meeting. I asked him why he was involved with something this corrupt, and he replied that it was bigger than the music business, and nothing we'd want to challenge without risking consequences. We all protested as he walked back into the house. I remember word for word the last thing he said. "It's out of my hands now. Remember you signed an agreement." He then closed the door behind him. The men rushed us to our cars and actually watched until we drove off. Blimey. I'm going to skip this paragraph, but it goes on to say, as the months passed, rap music had definitely changed direction. I was never a fan of it, but even I could tell the difference. Rap acts that talked about politics or harmless fun were quickly fading away as gangster rap started dominating the airwaves. Only a few months had passed since the meeting, but I suspect that the ideas presented that day had been successfully implemented. It was as if the order had been given to all major label executives. The music was climbing the charts, and most companies were more than happy to capitalise on it. Each one was churning out their very own gangster rap acts on an assembly line. Everyone bought into it, consumers included. Violence and drug use became a central theme in most rap music. I spoke to a few of my peers in the industry to get their opinions on the new trend, but was told repeatedly that it was all about supply and demand. Sadly, many of them even expressed that the music reinforced their prejudice of minorities. I officially quit the music business in 1993, but my heart had already left months before. I broke ties with the majority of my peers and removed myself from this thing I had once loved. I took some time off, returned to Europe for a few years, settled out of state and lived a quiet life away from the world of entertainment. He finishes by saying, "Although I plan on remaining anonymous for obvious reasons, my goal now is to get this information out to as many people as possible. Please help me spread the word. Hopefully others who attended this meeting will be inspired by this and tell their own stories. Most importantly, if only one life has been touched by my story, I pray it makes the weight of my guilt a little more tolerable. Thank you." I mean, first things first, my only reservation about it is because it was so brilliantly written. It was like a story. It was almost like I was reading a novel, and that's where I'm like, you could have just like made this all up. But if that is true, that is absolutely crazy, and it's not completely unlikely either, in my opinion. And you'll have to let me know what you think down below in the comments. But yeah, that is going to do it for this video. 3 very interesting conspiracy theories